Exchange. Written by N.R. Knight. Narrated by Peter Bishop. Late one night, about 10 months ago, I found myself rushing my daughter to the hospital. I remember the morning, what time I woke up, the food I ate, and the sound of my girl's voice yelling, "See you, Daddy," as she ran out the door to catch a school bus. Everything was normal, average, but were there signs? Could I have expected to bring her home from school at 12 that afternoon? Could I have guessed the cause to be chest pains, or predicted that those pains would return again 11 hours later, causing her to cry out in pain and fear? Could I have been better prepared for the race to the ER that ensued just before her heart gave out? I don't know. I remember that night, the heavy rain pounding against my car, creating a slick sheen on the streets that made driving over 40 impossible. The images of street lamps and traffic lights bleeding into one another on my windshield. I remember the franticness I felt as I gripped the steering wheel, swerving and slamming on the horn to warn the blurry shapes of pedestrians to get off the fucking road before they ended up getting personal with the front of my car. I remember her wide eyes as she held her chest in agony, the suffocating sense of hopelessness that filled the air around her by the time we reached the parking lot where she fell unconscious, her motionless chest by the time I carried her through those automatic doors. What followed was a long 40 minutes in the waiting room. The emergency room was surprisingly empty for a Friday night, apart from the woman at the check-in desk. Her face a mask of indifference. I doubted she had much interest in discussing why I was there, soaking wet and tapping my foot in my pajamas. Looking back, that indifference seems vaguely irritating. At the time, it was fine by me. I wasn't feeling talkative anyway. I sat in an uncomfortable waiting room chair and thought about my daughter. I wondered what those doctors were doing to her in that disgusting hospital room. My mind jumped back and forth between the present and the last time I had seen something like this. My wife had had a similar episode 8 years before. Shallow breathing, chest pains, sweating, moaning, a look of panic. I'll never forget that look. The look of someone whose time had come. For her, it had. From a combination of heart and lung failure. She died, officially, in the emergency room. Though by the time the ambulance arrived, there wasn't anything the doctors could have done to save her. Considering that, I thought, maybe it wasn't so irrational that I'd chosen to drive recklessly through the streets to the hospital myself, as opposed to calling 911 and waiting for my daughter to die. Still, the ride was rough. I probably did even more damage. I braced myself for the worst. The news, when it came, fell somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Not bad. Certainly not good. "She's unconscious, but her breathing's stable," the doctor started. Relieved, I interrupted and thanked him for telling me she was all right. At least that's what I thought he was saying before I sensed his grim disposition and cut myself off. He repeated she wasn't dead, but went on to report that she was far from healthy. At the time, the doctors could only guess at what was causing her symptoms. But within a few days, we learned my daughter was functioning with diseased heart and lungs. Likely hereditary, they said. Something inside me couldn't help but agree. Her heart was already struggling to pump blood, while her lungs made breathing difficult. Directly and quite coolly, the doctors told me if something wasn't done, and soon, the consequences would be dire. This wasn't a situation that could be remedied by a prescription. If she expected to live and regain her health, she would need a donor. For one heart and at least one lung, they said. So she was put on an organ donor list. We were asked to return weekly to make sure she remained stable until her number came up. Simple. But there was one thing I neglected to acknowledge initially. Something never mentioned by the doctors. Probably to keep our hopes up, as stress would make things complicated. Her blood. I was the one that had to ask. I needed to know what the chances were of finding a suitable donor. I never found out for a fact whether or not the doctors knew her chances from the start. Whether they knew all along how rare her blood was. I never wanted to know. Ignorance is bliss, as they say, and the idea that if we hung in just long enough, the organs would come like a postal package would have made the waiting more bearable. It would have been so. I wouldn't have inquired. I would have blamed time, until the letters suggested I ask. It was around 3 weeks after that first harrowing night in the hospital that my daughter was deemed healthy enough to go back to school. Out of caution, I stayed home from work that day, waiting tensely by the phone in case something happened. At least that way, I figured, I wouldn't be on the other side of town if I needed to pick her up. It was 1 hour before she was due to return home, 2 hours after the mailman should have made his daily rounds. I must have been dozing off at the time because I awoke to a strong whiff of something dreadful. It came and went so quickly, I was unsure whether I had only imagined it, but for a second, my nose was filled with a pungent aroma that smelled something like burning fish and wet smoke. Next, I heard the unfamiliar scraping sound of something sliding through my mail slot, despite the fact that no one, not even the mailman, ever used the thing. While I found it strange, I didn't feel like checking right away to see who could have delivered the letter. 5 minutes I lay there before deciding to get my mail. Once at my door, I saw the envelope on the mat. I picked it up and examined it. Completely blank. There was no return address, no sending address, not even a stamp. It was just a sealed blank envelope. I went to my window to peer outside. I didn't see anyone in the yard. No foreign cars were in my driveway or parked along the sidewalk either. I shrugged, figuring I must have missed them. Envelope in hand, I sat back onto my couch and stared at it momentarily. As I held it, I swear my fingertips started tingling, as though the envelope were made of little insect legs trying to wriggle out of my grasp. I absently passed the sensation off as nerves before finally opening the letter. I'm not quite sure that I should have. The tingling sensation left after the seal was broken. I took out the letter inside. Its texture was oddly damp. I remember the message well. It said, "You have a daughter that needs a heart and lungs or she will die. You won't find anything. Her blood is rare. Ask about the blood. You can still save her. The clock is ticking. You can exchange a child close to her age for her life. You must have them alive. 267. It was when I read those 5 lines, I started to hear clicking, as though someone were lightly rapping their fingernail on the back of my skull at irregular intervals. Since the message was so subtle, so ambiguous though, my immediate questions overshadowed any other thoughts or feelings. What was this? A threat? A joke? Who knew about my daughter's condition? She barely did. I mentally ran through a list of names of the few friends and family members with whom my daughter and I associated. None had the closeness, the timing, or the motivation to pull this off. My first instinct was to go to the police with the letter after my own mental investigation yielded no results. Unfortunately, when I did, the police investigation came up likewise short. In fact, without a return address or even a trace of fingerprints, other than my own, there was not much investigation to be done. Furthermore, without any act of physical violence or a direct threat, the authorities would not or could not do much to help. They just told me to remain cautious, keep my house secure, put the letter out of my mind, and go back to work. Try not to think about it, they said. Crazy folk will do this sort of thing from time to time. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the message about the blood. That letter I received wasn't the last. For the next few months, every 1 to 2 weeks, I received another message. Each one was more disturbing than the last. Some were short poems detailing how I would stare at her tombstone, wondering what I could have done. Others were more graphic, describing her choking on her own fluids as her faulty heart drooled blood into her flawed lungs. Each one had a different number at the bottom. Their meaning would eventually become clear, but at the time, I was simply unable to make the connection. The worst part of the whole ordeal had to be the clicking. With every word from those letters, the clicks became louder and louder. When I neglected to read a new one, the clicks would spike in volume and frequency until I did, giving me terrible headaches from which no painkillers or earplugs could save me. I heard clicks when people talked, at work, on the radio. I couldn't even enjoy dinner with my daughter anymore. I recall screaming at her once to shut her damn mouth before storming out of the kitchen. Even in my dreams, the clicks served as a metronome, a never-ending soundtrack as my mind, against my will, acted out the message's stories or predictions. No one but me could hear them. I tried chalking it up to stress of the letters reminding me that my daughter's chances of survival were in the single digits. Still, even that excuse couldn't prepare me for my eventual mental collapse. One of the messages came shortly before the end of my daughter's school year. I found her home a half hour earlier than me, reading one of the letters. I snatched it away from her, scolding her for checking mail that wasn't hers. Truthfully, though, I didn't want her to see the messages often describing my or her own demise. But instead of expressing the same fear and disgust I felt when I first read them, she simply gave me a puzzled look. Then she spoke, saying something along the lines of, "Dad, it's just a bunch of scribbles. Relax." It was then I actually read the letter. I mean, really read the letter. Not with my own inner monologue, not with the clicks. Just scanning the markings on the page with my eyes. What I saw was nothing more than a series of smeared lines and curves. After the first letter, I hadn't thrown away the messages I received. I had thought I would collect them as evidence to eventually show the police again to better convey that this was undeniably a long-term problem. But with the knowledge that the mess that was this most recent letter had at first appeared so like the others, I was compelled to go back and check through my archives of the disturbing mail I had now been receiving for months. I saw that, starting from the second letter onwards, the letters appeared to gradually become more unclear, finally reaching the altogether unintelligible state of the letter I was given today. Still, I understood them all when I listened to the clicks. Were the clicks translating this unreadable chicken scratch? I couldn't go back into work thinking about that. Another week passed. I took about 2 weeks of sick leave from my job. I spent them waiting by the door for the next letter. I didn't know when it would come, but I knew I had to catch the sender. The letters, the clicks, the translation. I needed answers. It became an obsession. Each day became a blur of me staring at the door, waiting for someone besides my daughter to walk up to it. Occasionally, I daydreamed about catching this elusive letter carrier, pinning them down, bringing my fist down on their snot-nosed face again and again, screaming why and how until they gave me an answer I liked. The clicks approved of these violent fantasies. I scared the mailman off on the third day, screaming at him that I knew it was him. I knew it wasn't, though. He never came to my doorstep, and he had no means or motive to make this happen. I don't know why I did it. The clicks approved of the blame. The day came eventually. I detected that memorable scent of fishy, wet smoke. I wasn't expecting it, but I didn't have 5 minutes for another mental check. I leapt for the door before they could even get the chance to think of slipping another letter through. I was sure I had them. I swung the door open to reveal my empty porch. I smiled. I let out a small chuckle before giving a hyena-like laugh. I leaned against the frame of the door, clutching my stomach, laughing. I slid to the ground. So I was crazy. It explained so much. That damp, fishy smoke I smelled was all in my head. Those clicks reverberating in my skull was because I'd snapped. I knew it. I did. I called out to imaginary men in white, telling them to stick me in a straitjacket right then and there because I had lost my mind. That's what I thought when I got up and walked back into my house. When I closed the door, I heard the slot and felt a piece of paper ricochet off my leg. I didn't feel that, I tried to convince myself. I'm crazy. I'm mad. The smell vanished. My smile didn't. Chills ran up my spine. I picked up the letter and took it back to the couch. I didn't bother looking out the window or opening the door again. I knew no one would be there. I read the contents of the letter, or rather, I listened to the clicks whisper them into my ear. It was one line. Your girl will talk with death today. 12. At 2:30, I got a call from the school saying my daughter had just been rushed to the hospital. At 4 o'clock, I overheard that if she didn't get her organs soon, she would suffer a violent death. I even heard them refer to euthanasia as an option. I left the hospital around 5:45. The clerks told me to drop by the rental place before they closed, so I did. Around 8 or 9, I found myself at the bottom of a few bottles at the local pub. I can't say for sure what the exact time was. When you're drunk and numb, numbers tend to run together. But somehow, even in my drunken stupor, the meaning of those numbers at the bottom of the letters hit me. How they were counting down to my daughter's final day, the day the predictions of the letters would come true. When I came home late, the clicks were suddenly soothing. They lulled me to sleep that night. No nightmares, no visions. All they did was click to me in black unconsciousness, repeating the first letter's contents with a smooth rhythm. I had my instructions. I awoke the next morning. I felt good. The clicks told me that everything would go well today, that my daughter would soon be okay, because I knew exactly what to do. So after a wash and a brief breakfast, I headed out to pick up the van from the rental place. For the next few hours I drove. The clicks were quiet for the first time in a while. They were respecting my hunt. Around midday, I found my prey. In a quiet, unfamiliar neighborhood, I spied a kid, somewhere around my daughter's age. He had some frizzy hair, wore crooked glasses, and carried a large book bag. I didn't know what he was doing out or where he was going. I didn't care. This kid was perfect. I'm not a religious man, but that moment I was sure he was a godsend. This kid was here for me, for my daughter. I just had to get him. I pulled up beside him. "Hey there," I said in my friendliest voice. "Heavy bag you've got there. Need a lift?" Before I could finish my sentence, the fucker bolted. Looking back, could I blame him? No. But then, suddenly, I was consumed with rage at him for running like that. He was teasing me. I shook as the clicks roared like a marching band. "Get him! Get him! Get him!" My muscles reacted before my brain could object as I launched the van forward. The clicks approved of my quick decision. There was no scream. Not one I heard, anyway. It was the thud that brought bitter sanity back, and the clicks lowered to the point of being inaudible. It was like waking from a dream. What was I doing? I looked through the windshield onto the street to see something lying in front of the van. My heart stopped. I got out to get a better look. The kid's arms and legs were crooked and bent at fantastic angles as he lay sprawled flat on the asphalt. His book bag was busted open, its contents strewn around the scene. His glasses and his left sneaker had been knocked off somewhere. I couldn't tell where the blood was pooling from. From his head, from his mouth, from the limbs bent too far in the wrong directions. I covered my mouth. What had I done? Why? After slamming my palm against my forehead several times, I wondered if he might still be alive. Yes, he was still breathing anyway. The clicks reminded me that was all I needed. A kid that was alive. I looked around. We were still alone, too. I had no excuse. I scooped him up in my arms, ignoring his warm bodily fluids dripping onto my arms. I opened the van's back door and laid him inside. I left before anyone could see us. It didn't take me long to realize that I had no idea where to go. The clicks had made no mention of where I should deliver the bleeding felony lying in the back seat. After 10 minutes of cleaning the hood of the van of the kid's blood with my shirt and 30 minutes of aimless driving, I finally gained the nerve to head back home. Where else was I supposed to go? Without further instructions, home was my best bet. Sure enough, leaning against my door was another blank envelope. I brought the envelope back to the van and opened it. This time, the scribbles were more like an ink blot from a Rorschach test, as if the messenger were mocking my madness. Translated by the clicks, though, it was a simple address. I took out my phone and entered it into the GPS. I can't say what happened afterwards. All I know is that for the next few hours I drove from location to location. I don't remember any of the places I went or what I did in between. All I remember is my ultimate destination. The next thing I recall is driving along a long strip of empty road with no signs or hydro poles in sight. In the passenger seat was a stack of ink blots. I looked at my phone. It was dead. I then looked back to see that the kid I abducted wasn't. It looked like I had bandaged him at some point to stop the bleeding. He was quiet, so he must have still been unconscious. Or maybe I knocked him out again. I don't know. After looking at him and then at the road, I finally started to feel guilty. Not just for running over an innocent kid, but for what I was doing to him now, where I was taking him. I figured I would eventually come across some lone house in the middle of nowhere. Stories of mentally disturbed pedophiles keeping children in their basements for years to be tortured, raped, or worse rushed into my mind. I wondered. I love my daughter, I thought. I love her so much. But was her life, one that would end in less than 2 weeks, worth the lifelong suffering of this one random kid? What would she say if she knew where I was now? The rational part of my brain finally broke through. I had to turn around, get this kid some medical attention. Forget the letters, forget the clicks, forget the smell, forget all the predictions. I had to accept that my daughter would soon die, just as my wife had. If only I'd come to that conclusion an hour earlier. Impossibly fast, the road in front of me opened up. In seconds, it wasn't a road anymore, but more like an unmarked parking lot, infinitely expanding in every direction. It was so smooth, I would have believed it was only paved that day. When I looked back, the road I had been driving on was gone. Behind me was nothing but the infinite plain of asphalt. Rationality was replaced by fear as the van began to slow down. Eventually it stopped and shut off. I tried the key in the ignition. Nothing happened. There wasn't even a cough of the engine trying to start up. I felt my chest tighten. I was now in the middle of a surreal nowhere, sitting in a dead van with a dead phone and a nearly dead kid. A light fog rolled onto the asphalt plain, and I began to smell that damp smoke again, stronger than ever. I coughed. I opened the door and fell out of the van, somehow thinking the air would be fresher outside. It wasn't. I lay on the ground coughing for a few minutes before my lungs suddenly adjusted. Once I finally stopped coughing, I felt a ray of something warm on me. When I got up, far in front of me was a figure, holding a lantern in the fog. I couldn't make out any details of its features. It was then that I heard the clicks from its direction. Walk, I translated. The lantern began fading into the fog. I scrambled up desperately and ran for it. Eventually, however, after slowing down several times from exhaustion, I understood that as long as I kept moving toward it, the light would not fade. Every few seconds a light breeze assaulted me with that smell. I knew wind came and went, but never so shortly like this. Either way, I was certain I was heading to the source of the smell. When I looked down, I saw the ground had become more and more gnarled and rocky, and it continued to do so the further I went. Then there were the clothes. The first article I noticed was a dirty sneaker that seemed like it had been there for years. It had rotted on the outside and lay there, lonely. As I went further, more abandoned sneakers began showing up. Next came shirts, then pants, then other articles of clothing littered the area. Every time that breeze came through, they would drift back slightly. Then I saw where the clothes were coming from. Eventually I came across a second figure. This one looked human, a girl. I called out to her, but got no response. I saw that she had a pickaxe and was swinging it mechanically into the asphalt. Her clothes were worn. Her pants were filled with holes like she'd been shot several times in the thighs. She was also missing a sneaker. When I approached her, she didn't notice me. She stared into the ground with red, bloodshot eyes, as if I wasn't even there. Faint black marks were drawn down the sides of her cheeks as though she had been crying ash. I was most unnerved by her age. She couldn't have been older than 14 or 15. When I tried to touch her, I winced back. Her skin was hot. Not hot like a fever, but hot like a burning stove. Something was wrong with her, I knew, but I couldn't do anything but continue on. The further I went, the more abandoned clothes and kids I saw. Most of them were missing at least one, if not more, articles of clothing. Some were only throwing their tools into the asphalt. Others were actually filling holes created. I glanced into one of the deeper ones being filled to see two kids, naked and just standing. Some of the working ones, it was a medical miracle that they were even still alive. The more I followed the lantern, the more kids I began to notice who were missing things. Not just clothes. They were missing physical parts of themselves. One kid I noticed had pieces of meat scooped out of parts of his legs and abdomen, like ice cream servings. I could see the white of his ribs. Another girl looked to have a clean hole in her body where her heart was supposed to be. A boy looked like his eyes had been taken out, yet still he worked. They all still worked. Then, suddenly, I noticed one kid. He was not working, but running out of pure horror. I saw him in the distance, heading across the asphalt. I watched him, morbidly curious to see what would happen. I knew in the back of my mind he wouldn't get far. They came out of the fog, tall, armless creatures that swooped around him. He didn't have a chance. There must have been 5 or 6. They had heads of pale, beautiful women, but the bodies of trees made of material that resembled satin. This boy didn't appear to be English, as I heard him plead in some foreign language. Even from a distance, I could see the figures smile sweetly. Their eyes closed as they listened to his cries. They opened their mouths, but rather than saying anything, they just clicked from their throats. Clicks I couldn't understand. They then bent their long bodies toward the center of the circle they created and put their heads upon their victim. I could hear sloshy wet sounds accompanied by the kids' screams as their heads bobbed up and down inside the circle. This was the exchange I was prepared to make. My daughter's life for the life of that kid I didn't even know. I would condemn him to live the rest of his days and beyond in this world, working until there was nothing left of him. I wondered what happened when there wasn't. I didn't try to run. Why was that, I wonder? Was it because of what I saw? Was it because I remembered the van wouldn't work? Was it because part of me still wanted this horrible exchange? I don't know. Soon, I noticed the fog getting darker with every step. I couldn't see the sky, but something told me the sun was setting. Eventually, there came a point when I no longer heard the sound of the children working. The area was black, save for the lantern which was still guiding me. I was already beginning to feel claustrophobic when I heard moans to either side of me. They echoed like I was in some kind of cave. Even though I still felt the asphalt below my feet, I heard stomach-turning squishes with every step I took. As the distance between the lantern and I closed, I began to see the walls as the cave narrowed. It wasn't made of rock, but rather something organic. In the walls were bodies of skin, stripped of all muscle, bone, and organs. Nothing was left of these figures, and yet somehow I saw their mouths move in agony as they struggled against their moist prison. The air was filled with moaning. "It's eating us." I thought about the breeze, now strong. I wondered if I was actually in a cave at all. The lantern thing clicked stop. 5 feet separated me from the morbid walls. The figure clicked for me to look down. A cooler was there. Inside, wrapped up and kept fresh with dry ice, were 1 heart and 2 fresh lungs. It was just as they promised. Silently, briefly, I wondered to whom they belonged. The clicks promised them to be satisfactory for my daughter, followed by instructions on how to present them to avoid suspicion. I didn't ask any questions. Whether my silence stemmed from a fear for my life or from a sort of indifference now that the deed was done, I don't know. I just nodded in comprehension. Accept, the thing clicked. Exchange. Then the lantern went out. I realized my eyes were closed. I opened them to see that I was back in my living room. The lights were out and it was dark outside. I looked down and felt the cooler on my lap. After setting the cooler off to the side, I went upstairs and got all of the letters together. The clicks didn't come back to translate them this time. I took them to the backyard and started a fire in the fire pit. I spent the hours until sunrise slowly tossing each letter and envelope into the fire, one by one. Once everything was done, I had no proof of my encounter with that place. There was likewise no evidence pointing toward me for the disappearance of that kid. My phone and the addresses were gone for good as I left both in the van. The van itself mysteriously returned to the rental lot in immaculate condition. I silently gave the organs I received from a deceased family member to the hospital for my daughter's operation. I had no evidence to prove my story. All I could do was try my best to accept what happened and move on. The surgery was a success. Months passed and my daughter went back to school. I eventually managed to go back to work. I still had nightmares of that place. It was torture knowing that no one would ever find the corpse of the boy for whose death I was responsible. They say that what goes around comes around, that karma's a bitch and always bites back. Whoever said that was right, because karma bit hard yesterday. I came home to find my daughter gone. At my doormat was an envelope. When I picked it up, it didn't tingle. I opened it and found typed, "I'm sorry, I had to. You should understand." My daughter didn't come home that evening. Since then, I've been sitting here, documenting this. When I started recounting my story, I wasn't sure what the account would ultimately be. A confession? No one would believe me. My suicide note? If my daughter was in that place, indefinitely, deathlessly, who would I be to take the easy way out while she suffered like that? I didn't know why or for whom I was compelled to write this down. I still don't know. But now, the smell is back. The clicks are whispering in my ear. They tell me they have her. They tell me I can save her. They promise to help me get her back in perfect condition or better. But only after I make a few more exchanges.
Crown the Clown. Written by Elias Withrow. Performed by Kaylin Scott Carter. I was always a spoiled kid. My parents were wealthy and decided to spend their money smothering their only son with an incredible childhood. I had it all. My playroom was insane. A huge TV, pinball machines, and every toy you could imagine. It was awesome. Despite having so much, I wasn't a brat about it. I can say that now, having thoroughly examined my childhood. I loved to share my immense stash of stuff with my friends. I gave toys away, invited them over for pizza and movies, and was all around pretty generous. On paper, I should have been a spoiled snob. But for whatever reason, I wasn't. Good genes, I guess. On my 9th birthday, I had a bunch of my friends over. My dad rented a huge moon bounce for us and decorated our backyard with superhero apparel. I was going through a major phase. Tables were set up with punch and snacks, little finger foods to keep us from complaining until dinner. Balloons and banners were tied to every surface, my parents' way of establishing how loved I was. Music played from giant speakers my dad had set up on the back patio. My friends and I ran around and jammed out while waiting our turn in the moon bounce. My grandparents arrived a couple hours into the party, bringing with them a party gift. My grandmother informed me she had purchased it at a yard sale the weekend prior. It was a giant hollow plastic clown head. It looked like one of those weird cheap toys from the 90s, something that was popular for a week before getting all of its units shelved. Its face was white with red circles lining the painted eyes. A smile was smeared to its lips, a big goofy grin that was also painted red. The nose was a bulbous orb of plastic that sat oddly on its face like a giant gumball. As I turned over this strange gift in my hands, my grandfather handed me a plastic gold crown. He said it was part of the game. Seeing my confusion, my grandmother laughed and explained what it was. She said I was supposed to wear the clown head while my friends attempted to sneak up and crown me. I flipped the head over and saw serrated notches lining the bald dome where the crown went. I thought it was pretty lame, but didn't want to be rude. I dutifully slid the plastic clown head over my own, the interior hard against my temples. As it settled over me, I realized I couldn't see anything. Red light filtered through the plastic, but there was a concerning lack of eye holes. My grandfather chuckled as he watched me stumble around, hands outstretched so I wouldn't bump into anything. I asked why there were no eye holes, and he told me it'd be too easy for me to win the game. I had to rely on my ears to keep my friends at bay. He said the game was called Crown the Clown. I was beginning to understand the rules. It was like some weird version of Pin the Tail on the Donkey, but with a clown and a crown instead. My friends had gathered around to watch me, and soon they were laughing and calling out for me. My grandmother tossed one of them the crown and the game began. It was surprising fun. The plastic mask got hot, but I didn't mind. I was too caught up in keeping my friends away from me and the crown off my head. After 20 minutes passed and still no one had managed to get me, I was laughing and stumbling around, doing my best not to bump into anything. My friend John was calling out to me, and I didn't know if he had the crown or if he was trying to distract me. Turns out, he was trying to distract me. I suddenly felt something click over my head, followed by a great cheer from my friends. I had finally been crowned. Smiling despite my defeat, I went to take the big plastic head off me, but found that I couldn't. The neck hole was suddenly smaller, curling tight under my chin and biting into my skin. I tugged harder, trying not to panic. The air inside the head had already grown thick. I wrapped my fingers around the base of the head, pulling up as hard as I could. I felt rough edges cut into me, and I immediately stopped. I could hear my friends laughing at me. I'm sure I looked ridiculous, but at that time, I didn't find any humor in the situation. Sweat dripped into my eyes, and I blinked against the burning sensation. My breath blew back at me from the tight walls of the head, the red light filtering through the eye paint, making me dizzy and disoriented. I was suddenly very aware of how claustrophobic the clown head was. I called out for someone to help me, doing my best to keep panic from my voice. Still laughing, one of my friends came to my aid. I felt his hands around my ears, and suddenly I screamed as he jerked upward. Pain exploded around my face, and I shoved him away from me, panting. Why couldn't I get this thing off me? It had been so easy to put on, sliding comfortable over my head with little room to spare. But now everything was squishing in on me, the opening flush against my throat. I suddenly realized my nose was bent against the plastic, bent painfully to the right. I then understood what was happening. The clown head was shrinking. I screamed for someone to get my dad, sweat pouring from my face. The head stunk, and the combination of unfiltered breath and sweat made me lightheaded. My throat was parched, but my lips were lined with perspiration. I felt the burning fingers of claustrophobia wrap around my mind. The head squeezed a little tighter. I screamed again for my dad, my vision obscured by the head. I suddenly heard him in the front of me and felt his hands trace the outer surface of my prison. His voice changed from amusement to worry in a matter of seconds, and that scared me even more. I tried tugging at the head again, yelling into the plastic dome, explaining that it was getting tighter and tighter. My dad heard the panic in my voice, and I felt him uselessly struggle to remove my source of agony. His fingers traced the now compressed opening at the bottom. He tried to slide his fingers between the lip of the base and my skin, but just ended up choking and gagging me as his knuckles burrowed into my throat. The clown head's grip on my head tightened further. I wheezed and sunk to my knees, the heat and lack of oxygen causing my head to swim. My dad was yelling at my friends, instructing them to go retrieve something from the woodshed. I didn't hear much, instead concentrating on my breathing. My head throbbed as the hard plastic compressed my skull like a grape waiting to pop. I heard my mom's concerned voice, a shrill inquiry that my dad ignored. I felt his fingers try to pry the head off my throat again. He could tell I was fading. Panic cracked his voice as he yelled at my friends to hurry. His fingers were back at my throat, digging desperately, trying to give me some kind of relief. I knelt before him, swaying slightly and sucking in hot, stinking air. Suddenly, my father tried to jam his hand further in, and I felt my gag reflex engage and my stomach rolled as I dry retched into the hot plastic. My body hitched, and I felt another wave coming. I tried to fight it, but it was like trying to stop a train. I vomited into the mask, regurgitated soda and pretzels gushing into the tight space. I gasped, and the smell alone brought another gout rocketing from my lips. It sloshed around my face, filled my ears, the hot bile splashing against my skin with nowhere to go. It was trapped inside the head along with me, and I was drowning in it. It came to just above my nostrils, a slimy yellow line below my eyes. My father heard me gurgling inside the head and quickly laid me on my back, the vomit pouring around my ears and giving me a pocket to breathe. I gasped in the putrid air and felt the plastic tighten again, a wet, hard compress that began to fill my vision with darkness. I felt my strength begin to leave my body. My head was wrapped with an iron grip, and I didn't know how much longer I'd last in its clutches. Suddenly, my friend returned with the item my father had asked for. I heard him instructing me, his voice drowned out by the puke in my ears. He slowly turned me on my side, and I coughed and gagged against the slurping vomit. My nose felt like it was breaking against the walls of my prison. My ears burned and sweat coated my skin. I felt my father slide something cold and hard along the side of my neck, just under the lip of the head. I immediately knew what it was. A crowbar. I gripped my teeth, tears pouring from my eyes as my dad apologized, his voice cracking with desperation. I howled as he applied pressure, the crowbar burrowing into my neck muscles. To my relief, I felt the mask give a little, just a slight lift that allowed some of the vomit to trickle out. Suddenly, the clown head tightened again, squeezing my skull harder than I could bear. I thrashed on the ground, screaming in agony, clawing at my head. I felt like my skull would explode from the pressure, and the darkness swam closer. I heard my father instruct my friends to hold me still as he readjusted the crowbar. Sweaty hands pinned me to the earth as my head was pushed sideways. I felt my father hovering over me, the cold tongue of the crowbar licking the side of my neck. My father was apologizing over and over. I knew something bad was about to happen. My muscles bulged in revolt as my dad jammed the crowbar under the lip, digging into my skin and drawing blood. He shoved it in until I felt its hard surface resting against my cheek. I tensed, warm blood streaming down my neck across my shoulders. I heard my father whisper into my ear to brace myself. Suddenly, overwhelming pressure cut into the side of my face, and I thrashed violently, clutching and tearing out handfuls of grass as pain shot across my cheek and neck like spreading lightning. The edge of the crowbar crunched into my jaw as my father applied pressure, a last-ditch effort to remove the clown head before it killed me. Tears ran down my face and red darkness shook my world. Puke and sweat coated my face as I tried to escape the pain. My friends held me in place and I heard one of them crying. My teeth cracked against each other as my father continued to pull upward. With a sickening popping sound, I heard my jaw break, and suddenly I was taken to a level of splintering agony I didn't know existed. My tongue waggled and went numb in my mouth. I felt a molar tear free from my gums. It tumbled across my tongue like bloody candy. I felt howling darkness rush me as it swallowed me. I felt a sudden surge of cool air as the clown head cracked and finally shattered. As I blacked out, I felt my father shaking me, clutching me in his arms. His voice faded into the nothing. I awoke in the hospital a few hours later, my face wrapped and contorted around some plastic that kept my jaw in place. I felt woozy and sick, an IV bag by my bed dripping relief into my bloodstream. My mother and father were at my side, eyes bloodshot and filled with concern. My grandparents sat on the other side of the bed, my grandmother crying. As soon as they saw I was awake, they began to apologize all at once. My father for doing what he did and my grandparents for exposing me to such horrors. Their voices all babbled into one, and I let my eyes close once again, the drugs pumping through my body, lulling me into a comfortable sleep. Thinking back on that day, I can still feel that horrible clown head. The way it smelled, the way the light filtered through the plastic, the weight of it resting across my skull. It's like one sick joke now. All these years later, now that I've recovered from the event, I can't help but feel disgusted amusement. Because you see, my jaw has never healed properly, and there's twisted scar tissue lining my cheek where the crowbar cut into me. My jaw is in a constant state of crooked humor, like a painful half-smile, combined with the scar tissue stretching from my lips. Well, some would say I look kind of like a clown.
Leave Your Flashlights at Home. Written by Jeff Harton. Performed by Steve Taylor. I've been a national park ranger for close to 2 decades. Protocols have changed a lot in that time. I write this just to try to keep people safe for the next time you venture to the big outdoors. Let me tell you about the last park I worked. I can't be too specific about the location for my job's sake. Anyway, we had clusters of campsites that we rotated annually. The idea was to prevent one group from getting overused and worn down, let nature regrow a little bit. The winter had just passed, and our big summer season was a few months away. I'm sent out to check the suitability of the campsites to decide which ones need time to recover and which ones we can open up. Winters here are cold. Not too many people camp during the winter, aside from rugged masochists, and Boy Scout troops led by people who believe they are rugged masochists. I didn't expect to find much out of the ordinary. The first site was cleared and ready to go. As I'm trekking to the next site, I see what looks like some debris and junk down a ways in the river valley. Looks like some jackasses set up an unauthorized camp down there. Usually when that happens, they leave garbage and smoldering fires. This is going to be a pain to clear up. I approach, seeing the telltale wreckage of what must have been one hell of a party. Crap scattered everywhere, skeletons of tents still raised up, and blood. I stop and time stops with me. Pools of blood are spread out along the ground, next to signs of something heavy being dragged into the brush. I pull my radio off my belt and pause. I then pull my Glock 22 out of my holster and rack one round. I'm a certified law enforcement officer, but I haven't had to use my gun in a long time. I quickly look around for any movement, then get on my radio and call in for backup. While I wait, I listen. Silence. Silence in nature isn't good. Prey get quiet when they sense a predator. I hope all the birds are being still on my account. I edge forward slowly, looking for anyone or anything. A shredded plastic cooler, a tent that has been annihilated, with more blood splashed on the walls and inside. And people died here, I know it. You can't lose that much blood and just walk off. But no people. Shreds of clothes and a little viscera drawing all the damn flies here, but no people. I've seen bears rummage through camps and destroy anything that looked edible. There are wild hogs here that cut trails through the deep brush and are even more dangerous than the bears, but this isn't either of them. The devastation here is just too much. Some scourge of God came through here and just ripped everything to pieces. Finally, backup arrives, and I'm sent to report to HQ. They even brought medics out here. I don't know why. There's no one here to save. One of the new recruits vomits at the scene. I'm glad to get the hell out of here. I get back in HQ as a buzz. Only 4 people work there, but calls are ringing, printers printing, and the air feels electrified. The manager sees me and signals me to his office. He's pale, ashen-looking, bloodshot eyes. I sit down by his desk, and he goes to the door and locks it. I've never seen him lock that door. He asks me what I saw. I tell him, uninterrupted. He looks even paler afterward, and his hands tremble a bit. There's a very long pause, and I expect more questions. He doesn't ask any. I leave, then hear the door lock behind me. After a few minutes, I hear him call someone up, and a long, low conversation ensues. I never see him again. Word comes down from on high. We're assigned a new manager, one who excels at what he calls crises. His first order of business, a controlled burn of the unauthorized camp and the sites closest to it. I'm not arguing. I watch the smoke rise in the distance and pray that's the end of it. New orders. Relocate the existing campsites closer to HQ. Before we do that, we stake out a few trail cameras at the new locations just to make sure it's not in the middle of a nesting ground. We put up a few cameras pointed at the hog trails through the brush for good measure. A couple of days pass, and we go out to collect the footage. The new manager takes it all and starts studying it in his office. A couple of hours into reviewing, he freaks out. Starts screaming and yelling, gets on the phone, calling up the line, spitting more obscenities. He spends the rest of the day and that night in the office calling up specialists and planners. Next morning, I show up for a meeting. Manager doesn't look like he slept. Massive changes afoot. He lays out our new plans, including massively bright lampposts circling the park border, as well as floodlights around the ranger station. Campsites need to be moved even closer in, clear lines of sight from the light if possible. I butt in, telling him that defeats the point of going camping. If you're just going on a short walk through the grass, then setting up so close you can see the parking lot. He tells me to shut up, that it's just the start. The park now closes at sundown, sharp. Also, we're now required to have a long gun on our person at all times. Now, it isn't uncommon for rangers to carry an AR-15 or a Remington 870 shotgun going out in the deep woods. There are wild and rabid animals out there. The real concern are massive pot growers. These aren't your chill neighbor who hides a few plants behind the tomatoes. They run the spectrum, from large-scale suppliers who like their privacy and dislike law enforcement to anti-government crazies who think we have no right over them, the true patriots. Both groups have a few common points. They tend to be well-armed. They do not like lawmen, and they won't shy away from taking a pot shot at some dumb poor ranger who finds himself in their fields. Keep in mind, Elliot Ness, Mr. I fought Al Capone in one, got scared off busting up Appalachian moonshiners because they constantly sniped at him in the foothills. They shoot to kill. Those are the reasons we keep the big guns around, not routine patrols. I drew the short straw and got the overnight shift. Manager tells me more changes to protocol will be listed when I return. Overnights used to be easy. Monitor the radios, bust up the parties if needed, check for poachers if they're operating nearby, make sure the forest doesn't burn down. I clock in and, per instructions, go to the gun cage. My, things have changed. Our shotguns have new rifled barrels, so they can handle the solid slugs we've been issued. That's the kind of firepower you want to take down a charging bear. God forbid you ever need it. The AR-15s have been stepped up too. The old 15-round magazines have been replaced by 30-round ones. Someone even snuck us in hollow point rounds. Makes no damn sense. Shooting in the woods, you need full metal jacket ammo so the rounds don't go wild when they touch a twig. Hollow points just exist to do more tissue damage. This is ridiculous. This is overkill. We're not a war zone. We don't need this firepower. Next to the radio, there are new instructions. Now, we're not allowed to directly respond to emergency calls. We can reply, figure out what the issue is, then we report to a new phone number I don't recognize. Time passes slowly tonight. I'm not even allowed to leave the building until sunup. A few uneventful nights pass. The new floodlights and lampposts are frying my eyes. It's so bright out there a blind man could see. A week later, some kids roll into the lot. They grab their backpacks and start hiking up the ridge. I know what they're up to. No one has booked a campsite that night. Cheap young'uns going on a campout that'll be a raging party. I wait for the sun to go down, confirming they're not out for a day hike. I call my manager to report. He instructs me to call the new number. I report up to them now. A curt voice answers the phone. He asks my park, then pauses. He asks the issue. Bunch of kids on an unauthorized site. Do I go break it up? I can see their campfire out the ridge right now.
No. Do not leave the building. Do not attempt communication. That is all. Report if there are any developments.
Right after daybreak, the manager rides up. It's real early.
Have you seen them? Did they leave?
No. Car's still there. Let them rest. They're probably all hungover. He curses non-stop. He then goes inside to make a call. I'm outside looking up the ridge when he exits the station. One AR-15 in his hand, another one strapped across his back, Glock on his hip. He marches single-mindedly toward his car. I try to ask him what in God's name he's doing, but he isn't listening or responding. He takes a jerry can of gasoline from his car and marches up the ridge. I yell after him. To no reply. I consider following him. That doesn't seem like a good idea. I go back inside and call the number. The same curt voice, the same direct questions. Yeah, the manager went up to that campsite, armed to the teeth and carrying gasoline. What the hell do I do?
Stay there. Do not interfere. Backup is inbound. Report if there are any developments.
About that time, I start to see smoke wafting off the ridge. 2 vans ride into the lot at a screaming speed. 12 men, heavily armed and armored, exit quickly. I go out to check. Hey, who are you guys? What's going on? The men are all lined up with that impeccable military precision. One of them, a commander, I assume, exits the vehicle last. He says, "Which direction did he go?" I mean, he's up there. I point at the increasing smoke. The men fan out and start jogging up the ridge. I hear rifles cocking as they leave. I try to shout after them, but no response. I look at the vans they came in, large, nondescript. They just say DOI response team on the side. Half an hour later, they return, dragging the manager with them. He is bound in zip ties. He screams.
I did what needed to be done, trust me! It's worse than they thought! We can't stop this! Burn it all!
They throw him in the back and sedate him. Commander approaches me, my neck hairs bristle in cold fear. I need to see the office. All computers and anything with a hard drive is coming with me. You mentioned videotapes. I need those too. I unlock the doors and they ransack the place. Everything gets taken. Printed reports from the last few years disappear into those vans. The videotapes get bagged up and held by the commander himself. He studies the gun cage. Cute. You're out of your league. He scoffs. Finally, they found everything they looked for. The commander tells me, "Call the number. Tell him it's contained. You need a new superior. Also, don't talk about this to anyone." They leave, and just on cue, the fire brigade and a few news vans show up. The fire is contained, the news reports say. Rumors of missing campers are unsubstantiated at this time. Still, the rumors alone are enough to scare off this season's campers. Quick change-up of managers is chalked up to bureaucracy. The press dies down after a week or two. The new manager is very good at dealing with them. Thankfully, with no new campers and our now even shorter open hours, we can get more work done around here. Rebuilding the station took some time, and we just set up the new campsites. They're practically spitting distance from the station. Nothing dramatic happens for a few days. Then on a whim, the manager tells us to set up some cameras around the station and the campsites. There's usually so much human activity around here, all you see are some raccoons, maybe the rare hungry bear, but we humor him and set him up all around. A couple of days pass, we collect the footage. I play poker with one of the rookies while the manager watches hours of footage of an empty but brilliantly illuminated parking lot. Then he gets to the footage around the station. Screams come from the office. We barge in and he's stamping on the camera hard drives, gibbering things I can't understand along the lines of,
Told me it was clean, safe, no recent activity. Bullcrap here, I'm not gonna do it.
He barks at us to leave. Later he makes a call. Rookie goes up to the door and listens in. Rookie comes back reporting,
Yeah, he's demanding a transfer. Says they lied to him. Something about they didn't do their jobs properly. He's not prepared or equipped here. Then I just heard the phone click and some sobbing.
Hours later, my manager exits the office. His shoulders are slumped, defeated. We cut our hours even further, practically open on weekends only. We'll have a full staff ready those days, but a skeleton crew the rest of the time. Campers are required to check into one of the closest sites. No campsite, and they're told to leave. We are not authorized to leave the station after dark under any circumstances. In an emergency, do not call 911, call the number, and do exactly what they say. We draw straws for who gets overnight shifts. Why we need to stay overnight if we can't do anything is beyond me. I asked the manager about it, and he just said that standard protocol is to have someone on hand to report any irregularities overnight. I have to work my overnight shift. I keep my phone close, the number dialed in, ready if I need to call. It is a bad night. I just wind up pacing around with my shotgun, glancing into the bright floodlights, trying to see what's past them. I hear crickets, and it relaxes me. Prey is quiet when predators are around. It was a long night. The next night, my manager draws the short straw. He seems resigned. In the end, we all have to take a turn. He brings the brightest damn tactical flashlight I've ever seen. Said he bought it just because he's afraid of the dark. He isn't really. He's afraid of the things in the dark. I get a phone call at 3 a.m. It's him.
Get over here now and bring guns.
What? You have a damn arsenal.
Now! Oh, I swear to God I screwed up. Oh man, I think they're attracted to the light. I called that number, and all they said was back up and be here in the morning. Oh, damn, damn, damn!
I hear the piercing staccato of gunshots. Pause. More gunshots. Screaming. Scuffling. The line goes dead. I call the number. A new, terse voice answers.
Look, I work at Park. I just got off the phone with
I just spoke with What can you report?
Something bad's happened. It's serious. I heard gunshots.
We will have backup there as soon as possible. Did he see anything else?
Yeah, he said he thought they were attracted to the light. Doesn't make sense to me.
Interesting. Thank you for your report. Park is now closed. You will be reassigned. Goodbye.
Officially, the park was closed to be scheduled for a controlled burn. Let the old trees die and make room for new ones. There was nothing in the official report about what happened to the manager on duty. The public understanding was bureaucracies need to be shaken up on occasion. No one asked any more questions. I get transferred to a new park halfway across the country. Change of scenery, and beautiful. I get some odd rules here, too. Don't go far after dark. And don't carry a flashlight. I'm concerned about why. Why can't you use a flashlight at night when you need one? They won't tell me. Be safe, everyone.
Chilling tales for dark nights.
That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our future stories.